I didn't notice him at first, which is strange because I've always been the kind of person who notices everything. I live alone in a narrow street where the houses sit too close together, where every curtain twitch and late-night footstep carries. Insomnia has a way of sharpening your senses, turning small movements into events. That's how I spend most nights, sitting by the window, pretending I'm not watching, while actually watching everything. The streetlight outside flickers, and the hum of it has become a kind of companion. It fills the silence in a way people used to. Then something changed. It started small, the way these things always do. A pattern where there shouldn't be one. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the porch light across the street would click on. Not earlier, not later, exactly 3:17. The first time I thought it was coincidence. The second time I checked the clock. By the third, I was waiting for it. There's something about repetition that digs into your brain, makes it impossible to ignore. We're wired to notice rhythm, to expect meaning, and once you start expecting something, you begin arranging your world around it. The house belonged to a man I'd never spoken to. I'd seen him before, of course, in that distant way neighbors exist. A nod here, a glance there. He was older, maybe late 50s, always dressed neatly, always moving with a kind of quiet efficiency. The sort of man who trimmed his hedges in straight lines and brought his bins in exactly on time. Ordinary, completely aggressively ordinary. Which is why what he did at 3:17 didn't fit. Ordinary people don't step outside at the exact same minute every night like they're answering a call. At first, all he did was stand there. The door would open, he'd step onto the porch, and he would stand perfectly still. No cigarette, no phone, no visible reason, just standing. I told myself he was getting air or maybe dealing with insomnia like me. That explanation held for a while until I noticed the way he stood. Too straight, too still, like someone posing as a person instead of actually being one. His head would tilt slightly, not enough to be obvious, just enough to feel wrong if you stared too long. I started keeping track without meaning to. Nights blurred together, but 3:17 became an anchor point. I'd check the clock, then the window, then him. Always the same sequence. Light on, door open, step out, stillness. Sometimes he stayed for a minute, sometimes 5. There was no consistency in how long he remained, only in when he appeared. That should have been the detail that reassured me. Randomness suggests normal life, but in this case, it did the opposite. It felt like the duration didn't matter, like the act itself was the important part. About a week in, I noticed something else. He wasn't just standing there, he was looking, not around, not at the street or the sky, but at something specific, always the same direction. Down the road, past the last streetlight, where the pavement dissolves into a darker stretch lined with trees. There's nothing there. No houses, no shops, just a bend that swallows whatever goes around it. During the day, it's unremarkable. At night, it feels like the edge of something. And every night at 3:17, he looked straight at it. That's when it stopped being harmless. Watching someone is one thing. Realizing they might be watching something back is another. It creates a loop, a tension you can't resolve. I started wondering what he saw, what he expected to see, whether there was something in that darkness that I couldn't make out from my window. I told myself it was just perspective, just shadows playing tricks, but the thought stuck. It grew. Curiosity has a way of dressing itself up as concern, making you feel justified in feeding it. The first time he moved, I almost missed it. It was subtle, a shift rather than a step. He turned just slightly, as if adjusting his stance. But the angle was wrong. Instead of turning back toward his house, he turned further toward the road, toward the darkness, and then he stepped off the porch. That shouldn't have mattered. People step off porches all the time, but this felt different, like crossing a line rather than taking a step. He walked slowly, deliberately, until he reached the edge of the streetlight's reach. Then he stopped again, half in light, half in shadow. I remember leaning closer to the glass, holding my breath without realizing it. There's a point where observation turns into participation, where you're no longer just watching something happen, you're involved in it simply by witnessing it. I felt that shift then, a quiet understanding that whatever this was, it wasn't meant to be seen, and yet I couldn't look away. He stood there for longer than usual that night, long enough for my eyes to start playing tricks on me. When he finally moved again, it was sudden. Not rushed, not panicked, just decisive. He stepped fully into the dark beyond the streetlight and kept walking. No hesitation, no glance back. He disappeared around the bend like he'd done it 1,000 times before. I stayed at the window long after he was gone, staring at that empty stretch of road, expecting something to follow him back. Nothing did. The streetlight flickered, the hum returned. Everything looked normal again. But it wasn't. Because now there was a second pattern. He didn't just come out at 3:17, he left. And once you see a pattern extend, you start asking a different question. Not what is he doing, but where is he going? That question settled into me, heavy and persistent. I tried to ignore it, to go back to the comfort of passive watching. But the nights felt different now, quieter in the wrong way, like the street was holding its breath. And every time 3:17 approached, I felt it too. I told myself it was a simple decision, the kind you make when curiosity outweighs caution. That's the version of the story that sounds reasonable in daylight. The truth is less clean. I had been building toward it for days without admitting it, rehearsing the idea in small, harmless thoughts. What if I just stepped outside for a minute? What if I walked as far as the streetlight? What if I only watched from a distance? Each version felt manageable on its own, but together they formed a path I was already halfway down. By midnight, I'd stopped pretending I was going to sleep. The apartment felt too small, the air too still. I kept checking the time, watching the numbers shift closer to 3:17, like they were pulling me forward. At 3:10, I put my shoes on. At 3:14, I was standing by the door with my hand on the handle, listening to the quiet of the hallway outside. There's a particular kind of silence that only exists in the early morning, when even the people who stay up too late have finally given in. It's the absence of interruption, the sense that whatever happens now won't be witnessed. At 3:16, I opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit immediately, sharper than I expected. It wasn't just temperature, it was the way the air felt thinner, like it had been stretched. I pulled my jacket tighter and moved down the steps slowly, keeping my eyes on the house across the street. The porch light flicked on, exactly as my phone ticked over to 3:17, right on time. The door opened and he stepped out. Seeing it from outside was different. From my window, there had always been a layer of separation, a sense of distance that made everything feel contained. Out here, there was no buffer. The light from his porch reached farther than I'd realized, cutting across the pavement and stopping just short of where I stood. I stayed in the shadow, instinctively avoiding that line. He didn't look at me, not then. He did exactly what he always did. He stood still, facing the end of the road. For a moment, I thought about going back inside. The idea of it seemed almost appealing, like waking up from a dream and you don't fully understand. But I didn't move. I watched him the way I always had, except now I could hear it. The faint sound of his breathing, steady and controlled. The soft shift of fabric when he adjusted his stance. Details that made him more real and at the same time less explainable. After a minute, he stepped off the porch. I waited until he was halfway down the path before I moved. Timing felt important, though I couldn't have said why. I crossed the street quickly, keeping my steps light, and stopped just short of where the streetlight began to fade. He was ahead of me now, walking toward the bend. His pace was unhurried, consistent, not the walk of someone heading somewhere with purpose, but not aimless either. It felt measured, like he was matching something I couldn't hear. I followed. The distance between us stayed the same at first, far enough that I could tell myself he wouldn't notice me. close enough that I wouldn't lose him when he reached the darker stretch. The streetlight behind me flickered once, then steadied. I resisted the urge to look back. There's a point where turning around feels like admitting you've made a mistake, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. As we reached the bend, the light fell away completely. The darkness there is different from the rest of the street. It's not just the absence of light, it's the way sound seems to dull, the way your eyes struggle to adjust. The trees on either side lean inward slightly, their branches overlapping just enough to block what little glow might reach from the houses behind. I'd walked this road during the day dozens of times without thinking twice. At night it felt unfamiliar, like a place that only existed under certain conditions. He didn't slow down as he entered it. He just kept walking. I hesitated at the edge for a fraction of a second, then stepped through. The temperature dropped again, or maybe it just felt that way. The air pressed closer, carrying a faint smell I couldn't place. Damp, maybe, or something older. I focused on his silhouette ahead, letting my eyes adjust to the shape of him rather than the details. That made it easier to keep track, easier to pretend this was still normal. A few steps in, I realized something was wrong. The road should have curved gently to the right after the bend, opening up into a longer stretch that eventually met the main road. I knew that. I'd seen it, walked it, driven it. But the curve didn't come. The road kept going straight, the trees closing in tighter on either side. I slowed slightly, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I knew. Maybe I'd misjudged the distance. Maybe it just felt different in the dark. Ahead of me, he didn't react. He walked as if this was exactly how the road was supposed to be. I kept going. The houses were gone now, not just out of sight, but gone in a way that felt complete. There was no glow behind us, no hint of the street we'd left. When I finally did glance back, there was nothing but more road and more trees. The bend had disappeared. It wasn't a matter of distance. It was as if it had never been there at all. My chest tightened, a slow, creeping awareness that I'd crossed into something I didn't understand. I almost called out to him then, not because I expected an answer, but because saying something, anything, felt like it might anchor me. I didn't. The silence seemed too solid, like sound would just get absorbed into it without traveling anywhere. So I kept following, my footsteps quieter now, without me trying to make them so. That's when he stopped. It wasn't gradual, one step forward, then nothing. He stood in the middle of the road, his back to me, perfectly still. The suddenness of it made me freeze too, my foot hovering mid-step before I set it down carefully. The distance between us had closed without me noticing. He was closer now, too close. I waited, seconds passed, stretching longer than they should have. He didn't move, didn't turn, didn't give any sign that he knew I was there. But something had changed. I could feel it in the way the air pressed against my skin, in the way my breathing sounded too loud in my own ears. Slowly, deliberately, he tilted his head, not toward the darkness ahead, but slightly to the side, listening, and then, without turning around, he spoke. "You're not supposed to be here." The voice was calm, almost conversational, not surprised, not angry, certain. I didn't run. That's the part I keep replaying, trying to understand. Every instinct, every warning signal, every story I'd ever heard about situations like this pointed in one direction: leave, now. Don't wait for confirmation, don't ask questions, don't try to understand, just go. But I stayed where I was, my feet fixed to the ground, like I'd already committed to seeing this through, even if I didn't remember making that decision. "I know," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. They sounded thin, like they didn't belong to me. For a second, I thought he might turn around, that I'd finally see his face, and whatever this was would resolve into something I could explain later. He didn't. He stayed facing forward, head still tilted slightly, as if he was listening to something just beyond the edge of the hearing. "You should go back," he said. There was no urgency in it, no threat, just a statement, the same way you might tell someone they've taken a wrong turn. That made it worse. Fear I could have reacted to, anger even better. But this calm certainty, this quiet acknowledgement that I was out of place, it stripped away any illusion that I had control over the situation. "I've seen you," I said, "every night at 3:17. Silence followed. Not empty silence, but the kind that feels like it's waiting for something. I became aware of the space around us in a new way. The trees weren't moving. There was no wind, no rustle of leaves, no distant hum of traffic. Even the usual background noise of a sleeping neighborhood was gone. It was just us, standing in a stretch of road that shouldn't exist, suspended in a moment that didn't feel like it was passing normally. "I know," he said again. The repetition landed differently this time. Not acknowledgement, but confirmation. As if my watching hadn't been unnoticed. As if this entire thing had been unfolding with both of us aware of the other, and just waiting for the moment when the distance between watching and involvement disappeared. "Why do you come out here, Paitan?" I asked. The question felt small as soon as I said it. Inadequate. Like asking for directions in a place where directions didn't apply. Still, it was something, a way to push against the silence. To force this into a shape I could understand. He lowered his head slightly, not in thought, but in a way that suggested he was focusing on something closer now. "Because it expects me to," he said. The word expect hung in the air longer than it should have. It implied a relationship, a pattern, something ongoing. "What does?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step forward. I felt it more than saw it. A shift in the space between us, a subtle change in pressure, like the air had been disturbed. I realized then that I hadn't been paying attention to what was ahead of him, only to him. My focus had been narrow, fixed on the human shape in front of me because it was the only familiar thing in an increasingly unfamiliar place. Slowly, I lifted my gaze past him. At first, I saw nothing, just more road, more darkness, the faint outline of trees continuing in an unbroken line. Then my eyes adjusted, not to light, but to absence. There was a section of the road ahead that looked wrong. Not darker, not lighter, just inconsistent. Like a gap in a pattern you didn't realize you were looking at until it broke. "What is that?" I whispered. This time he did turn his head slightly. Not enough for me to see his face, just enough that I could tell his attention had shifted from whatever was ahead to something else. "It's closer tonight," he said. My stomach dropped. "What is closer?" He didn't respond. Instead, he took another step forward, and I realized with a sudden, cold clarity that he wasn't just standing out here every night. He was moving toward something, gradually, incrementally, each night at 3:17, stepping a little farther into whatever this was. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked. "A while," he said. That wasn't an answer. Or maybe it was, just not one that fit into any scale I could understand. "You need to go back," he added, more firmly this time. "It hasn't seen you properly yet." The wording hit me in a way I couldn't immediately process. Properly? Before he could answer, something changed. It wasn't a sound, not exactly, more like the absence of one. A subtle shift in the pressure of the silence, like something had taken a breath and everything else had adjusted around it. The space ahead of us, the part that looked wrong, seemed to deepen, to pull slightly inward. And then I saw it. Not all at once, not clearly, just enough to register that there was something there that hadn't been there a second ago. A shape that didn't resolve into anything recognizable. Edges that refused to stay consistent when I tried to focus on them. It was like looking at something through layers of distortion, except the distortion wasn't between me and it. It was part of it. My body reacted before my mind caught up. My muscles tensed, my breathing hitched. And I felt that same instinct rise up again, stronger this time. "Run. It knows," he said quietly. The words snapped my attention back to him. "What do you mean it knows?" "That you're here, he said. My chest tightened. How? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he did something small, almost insignificant. He shifted his stance just enough that his shoulders angled slightly toward me. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't wanted to. He hadn't been looking at the end of the road every night. He'd been making sure nothing came from behind. The realization hit all at once, rearranging everything I thought I knew about what I'd been watching. The stillness, the way he stood, the slight tilt of his head. It wasn't passive observation, it was vigilance. It doesn't just come from there, he said, as if confirming the thought I hadn't spoken. A cold wave moved through me, starting at the base of my spine and spreading outward. Then why stand on your porch? I asked, my voice barely steady. Because that's as far as it could reach at first, he said. At first, the implication settled heavily. And now? I asked. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked forward again, toward the shifting, inconsistent space ahead. Now it's learned the distance, he said. Something in the darkness moved. This time, I was sure of it. The shape ahead didn't just shift. It adjusted, like it was orienting itself, aligning with something, with us. My throat went dry. What happens if it gets closer? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before, but heavier. It doesn't get closer, he said. Not the way you're thinking. I didn't understand. What does that mean? He turned his head just enough that I could see the outline of his profile in the dark. Still not his face, just the suggestion of it. It stops needing the distance, he said. The shape ahead of us pulsed. Not visibly, not in a way I could point to, but in a way I could feel, like a pressure wave moving through the air, subtle but undeniable. And then behind me, something shifted. I froze. Slowly, carefully, I started to turn my head. Don't, he said, sharply now. I stopped. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was affecting my balance. What is that? I whispered. His answer came immediately, this time. That's the part of it that followed you? The world narrowed to a single, unbearable point of awareness. I wasn't just following him. For a moment, I couldn't move at all. The idea didn't settle into me all at once. It unfolded, piece by piece, each part worse than the last. I had spent days watching him, convinced I understood the shape of what he was doing. I thought he was the center of it, the cause, the one connected to whatever waited out here. But I wasn't outside the pattern. I was part of it. Don't turn around, he said again, quieter now, not a warning, this time, a fact. My body locked into place, every muscle held tight, like if I stayed still enough, I might disappear from whatever was behind me. My breathing had gone shallow without me realizing it. Each inhale felt loud, intrusive, like it didn't belong in this space. What do I do? I asked. It was the first honest thing I'd said since stepping out here. No curiosity, no pretense. Just the question that actually mattered. For a second, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, you stay where you are, he said, and you don't let it understand you. I don't. What does that mean? It learns patterns, he said. That's how it moves. That's how it gets closer. Repetition, expectation. My mind tried to catch up, to fit his words into something usable. The time, I said slowly. 3:17? Yes. The porch, you standing there? Yes. You've been, feeding it a pattern. Containing it, he corrected. That word hit differently. How is this containing it? He shifted slightly again, and I realized he was doing the same thing he always did. Balancing attention. Not fully focused on one direction, never fully turning away from another. Because it only understands what repeats, he said. If you give it something consistent, it stays within that shape. It follows the rules you establish. And if you don't, I asked. He didn't hesitate. It makes its own. Behind me, something adjusted. I felt it this time, not heard, not seen, felt. like a change in pressure just inches from my back. My skin prickled, every nerve suddenly aware of the space I couldn't see. I clenched my jaw. It followed me because I broke the pattern, I said. Yes. I wasn't supposed to come out? No. A pause stretched between us. What happens now? I asked. This time he didn't answer immediately. The silence deepened and I became aware of something else, something I hadn't noticed before. The shape ahead of us, the one that refused to resolve properly, had stopped shifting. It was still waiting. For you? I pressed. For both of us, he said. That landed heavier than anything else. I swallowed, my throat dry. You said it hasn't seen me properly yet. Yes. What happens if it does? His voice, when it came, was almost gentle. Then it won't need to follow you anymore. A cold understanding settled into place. It wouldn't follow, because it would already be with me. The thing behind me shifted again, closer. I couldn't stop it this time. My head turned just a fraction, not enough to see clearly, just enough to catch the edge of something that didn't belong to any shape I understood, something that seemed to bend around the idea of a body without committing to it. Stop, he said sharply. I snapped my gaze forward again, heart slamming against my ribs. Sorry, I breathed. It's not about being sorry, he said. It's about not finishing the action. I already started, I said. Yes, he said. So don't complete it. My hands were shaking now. I pressed them against my sides to steady them. How do we fix this? I asked. Another pause. Then, we don't, he said. The word hung there, final. We survive it. The shape ahead pulsed again, stronger this time. The air seemed to draw inward, like the space itself was tightening. It's closing the distance, I said. Yes. Because of me. Yes. Guilt flared, sharp and immediate. I didn't know. It doesn't care, he said. That made sense. In a way, nothing else did. What do? I asked again, my voice thinner now. He took a slow breath. You go back the way you came, he said. Slowly, without rushing, without looking at it again. Both of them? I asked. Yes, my chest tightened. And you? I stay, he said. The word hit like a weight. No, I said immediately. You can't just... I can, he said, calm but firm, because it already understands me. I'm part of the pattern. You're not yet. Not yet, the implication was clear. If I stay, it gets worse, I said. Yes, if I leave...